Hello, everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about more group management skills. So skills to help in managing the process of the group. So similar to a previous video that I did on this, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of the core counseling skills for individual and group work. So the core skills of active listening, of paraphrasing, reflecting of feelings and meaning, the use of confrontation and immediacy, etc. So those core counseling skills are really the mechanism of the how of going about all of the skills for group management. So I'll talk about some of the particulars of skills that I feel that are unique and particularly important for group, but remember those core counseling skills. Okay, so first off, I'm going to be talking about cutting off skills. Then also on the other side of the continuum, talking about drawing out. Then I'll talk about rounds and dyads. So those four skills for today. Okay, so cutting off from the Jacobs et al. Textbook on group skills. I just wanted to read a couple lines about cutting off. So they state, to lead an effective group, a leader must be willing to and able to cut off members when necessary. I think for beginning counselors, this can be scary. This can be uncomfortable. It can feel kind of taboo to cut people off. It can feel rude. It can go against some of our cultural traditions about how we go about listening to people, and especially as we're, embodying this role as counselor. But cutting off is important. There's no way around it, particularly in a group. We must be able to cut members off. And we'll talk about the how and the why in just a second, but some of the other, ultimately it's just like sometimes members need to stop talking. I think that's a really simple way of putting it. Some books talk about it as, blocking skills or intervening skills, but cutting off is kind of the core principle there. So I just wanted to add that actually let's go into the why. Why might we need to cut off members? And also from the textbook, I feel like there's two broad examples that were pretty good examples. So it states that one, when a member is either rambling, storytelling, or avoiding going deeper, that's when we might need to cut off members. Or two, when a member is saying something inappropriate. We have to be thoughtful of what that inappropriate word means, but it's usually if they're like attacking another member, if they're saying some really harmful things to other members that aren't therapeutic in any way, that we can't see any therapeutic way of involving them. So the how, we can address cutting off in a person-centered manner. It's not like we have to do it in a harsh way. We also don't have to do it in like a fearful way that we're scared of saying it. We can be honest, but also kind. The usually prefacing seems to really make a difference from my experience. Like if we need to cut off a group member, we might say something like, hey, I need to pause you really quick. Something important's coming up, so I just need to cut you off. And then you go into whatever reason it is. So one, I guess, way of doing that, even without just like that direct approach of just cutting off, it might just be like, I want to pause you really quick. What are other people thinking right now about what's coming up for Susie? So that's one way of using a linking skill to cut off, but then get more involvement from others. Immediacy might be a way of using cutting off too. So if you notice, one of the examples was when someone's avoiding going deeper, you might say, Max, it seems like when you talk about when you talk about your family, you get angry, but I really feel like, that you're really just deeply hurt and sad about what you've missed out in your family dynamic. So, we might just cut off and just make that statement if they're only expressing anger to try to get to that deeper emotion. So really that's just a reflection of feeling. But the key is like, if we feel that it's rambling or going too long or not making the depth that we need, then we can cut off. If members start to like yell and scream at each other, sometimes there's room for that to be processed and made sense of. But like if it's like, hey, this is actually going a really negative direction quickly, yeah, we need to intervene and we need to cut off. So those are a couple examples. So like I said earlier, on the other side of the continuum is drawing out. So sometimes members need to get more involved. There could be a variety of reasons why people aren't being engaged in the group process. just going to jump to page 199 to address a little bit of the drawing out skill. One thing that I like from when in the section on reasons for drawing members out, the very last line, it says people usually gain more when they explore uncharted waters. So that might be part of the key of what's holding people back, why they need to be drawn out, is because they might feel like a fear or an anxiety, of going into a place that they haven't really processed before. They haven't really gone there, or they haven't done so in an interpersonal format with other people around. Uh, that's not the only reason why people might be quieter, though. It might just be that they're thinking. They might just have a quiet temperament. They could be bored. The content might not be connecting for them, or they could be distracted by whatever else, by other life circumstances, or some sort of reaction that's coming up. They might also feel confused of what's going on in the group class. So we have to be thoughtful of the why behind the behavior or the lack of behavior. So ultimately, though, how do we draw out? There can be a lot of different ways, but also in the textbook, it talked about the art of drawing out, which I appreciate. It says sometimes drawing out is a real art. The skilled leader prompts members to talk, share, or express themselves without feeling forced or pressured. The challenge is to be able to invite members to share, but to provide safe ways to decline at the same time. So sometimes it might be, hey, John, I want to invite you to share. I've been seeing some reactions coming up for you, and I'm curious about what's coming up for you. That's not even inviting him out, but it's just kind of a non-confrontational way of encouraging them to share. But if you get the feeling like, hey, they might need it now, they might feel like an anxiety if I just ask them a question about it. You can always say, hey, it's okay if you're not ready to say anything. But, Stephanie, I'm wondering what was coming up for you. It seemed like something important was coming up for you and John talking about. So that can be just a really simple, clear way, direct, but in no way just pushy of drawing out. Other ways, other skills, like you could use dyads, which we'll talk about in a little bit more in a moment, but you can have members pair up and talk together. You can do rounds, which we're going to talk about in a second. I'll have everyone in the group share their thoughts briefly. I've also known in really subtle ways you can draw out, really subtle kind of sometimes I've just made eye contact with someone and they make eye contact with me, like when I'm the group leader, and I can tell they have something to share. It's almost just like they're on the edge of their seat ready to say something. So sometimes I just kind of nod to them. I look at them and just kind of smile and say, just encouragingly with my nonverbal look to them with a small smile. And a lot of times that's enough to get people to jump in there. Some people are going to need more of a directive approach to get drawn out. Some are just going to need the subtle permission to jump in there. Okay, so let's go to rounds and then dyads. So rounds. So rounds is pretty simple, just like it sounds. Like it's an opportunity to give every member in the group a chance to talk. So you give some sort of prompt, and then you ask everyone to share their thoughts. Usually, the prompt needs to say something about being brief. You usually don't want people to talk for like 5 minutes a piece because that could take the whole group, depending on the number and the process. But sometimes it could be something like in my group, like my internship classes, for example, I usually just say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being things are going great at your site and 1 things are going really poorly, how's your site going? Then everyone just raises their hand and shows the number. So that's a way of almost doing a round in a virtual space that's everyone goes at the same time. But if you're in person, everyone can just verbally say the number. You could also just say, some of them are just like, hey, maybe it's at the start of the group and you're not sure, members don't really seem to have arrived fully yet. Like you could say, I want to hear from everyone really quick. Just if everyone would respond with one of these 3 words or one of these 3 phrases. So number 1 is I'm ready to be here, I'm almost ready to be here, and I'm not present today yet. So then you can just go around to kind of get a pulse on where the group's at. So yeah, you can give a number, a small phrase. You can ask them, just say, hey, in a sentence or 2, share, how things went the last week. or in one word describe how today went for in our group. So there's not one way to do it, but that's just kind of the idea is like, hey, let's hear from everyone and let's make sure that it doesn't get too lengthy. Sometimes if you do a prompt, the members won't follow it, so you have to be ready to cut off and redirect and remind them of the format. Sometimes a particular member might get really emotional right away, so it might be alluring to like, hey, we need to stop and just address this and stop the round and just keep going. You can do that, but a strategy that I like from the textbook is to, if you feel like, hey, we need to circle back to something big's coming up, we might be able to just say, hey, I really see that what you're bringing up is really important. We're going to circle back. I want to quickly just kind of finish the round just to briefly hear where everyone's at. We'll just hear their really quick words. It'll only take, one more minute, and then we're going to circle back to you. So if you feel like someone's ready to just to be like, hey, let's pause that for a second just so we can finish the round and get back to you, then we'll do that. Or, the other option is like, hey, is everyone okay if we pause the round and we just attend here? So there's ways of being collaborative in that process if you feel that would help kind of the group dynamic and the trust. So just a few ideas if you feel like you might need to attend to the present moment. And the last thought about rounds is don't overuse rounds. Don't do like 20 rounds or in a session. A lot of times, honestly, I don't even use any rounds in a session. Maybe at the start, maybe at the end to kind of check in. But the key is that we're being thoughtful about why we're using the rounds. Like if we're just using them because we're nervous or we don't know what else to say or people aren't saying anything, so we feel like we have to break the silence, then we need to be more thoughtful than just needing to kind of attend to our own discomfort. So yeah, just be sure that you're not overusing the rounds, but they can absolutely have their place. Okay, last thing to talk about are dyads. So dyads, like I mentioned earlier briefly, is basically where you pair members up to discuss something and then they come back together. And they're normally pretty brief, like 2 to 5 minutes. Like having too long of a dyad kind of disrupts the group dynamic, and it almost can lead to like a splitting to factions within the group, of teaming in the group to where they're doing their own group, then they come back to the group press and they're not going to talk about it. That won't always happen, but it's just something to be thoughtful of. That the key for dyads is we spark the engagement, and then we come back together and process as a full group. I appreciated on page 226 that there's the uses of dyads, the various ways we could use it. Talks about we could use dyads to develop comfort, to help members kind of build energy and warm up, to process information or process a group exercise. If we need to finish up a topic and have everyone have a chance to speak about it. Maybe we need to pair certain members together. Maybe 2 members would really benefit from talking to each other. So we as leaders could choose, the pairs and encourage those 2 to talk together. Sometimes we might need to talk to a specific member, and it would kind of disrupt the group if we just talk to them in particular. So like maybe some big reaction or some like angry reaction or something inappropriate might have surfaced. So we can say, hey, let's do a pair really quick or a dyad, and everyone talk to each other about X, Y, or Z topic, and I'm going to be paired with so and so, and then so you just do all the pairs, but you are in the pairs as well. You can be part of the dyad. And sometimes you might just like need to shake things up and change, just vary the format as it says in the book. And the last one is like giving yourself some time to think. If something bigger happened and you're like kind of overwhelmed, sometimes you can have that, a dyad be used to give yourself a moment to think about, be thoughtful about how to respond. The book talks about those in more depth, but I wanted to briefly just mention those reasons. The key, like I mentioned with rounds, the key with all of these skills, with cutting off, drawing out, rounds, and dyads, I'm going to finish just with this principle, is that we need to be intentional and thoughtful about why we're using those skills. We need to have a clear rationale of like, why is this going to be helpful to the group process and the group members? Sometimes, like I've said before, sometimes maybe we're just nervous. It's almost like questions. We just rely on questions and they become a crutch. If we're nervous, if we're not sure what to do, we just throw in one of these interventions. Is that harmful? Is that bad? Probably not harmful, but is it clearly intentional? Does it have a backing behind it? Do we have a clear rationale? Maybe not. So I really encourage you to not depend on any of these certain skills if you're stuck or scared or don't know where to go. Try to avoid just throwing these out there to you know feed your own discomfort and like kind of avoid your own discomfort. There's probably other strategies to use, maybe even just immediacy of you and naming the discomfort. Uh, just a few thoughts there. So happy to talk about these. Happy to respond to any comments or questions. So please reach out. Thanks.